Thank you so much for joining us tonight for Backpacking 101. As I mentioned earlier today, this is a two-part class. There is so much to learn about backpacking. And first and foremost, I want to thank our sponsor for this evening, Highlander Adventure. I'm going to tell you a little bit about them towards the end of the call, but they have been very supportive of us. We've been a part of their last event, and it's a backpacking event, as you can imagine. So perfect class to learn more about that later on. So who am I and why should you listen to me? So I am one of the founders of the 52 Hike Challenge. You probably heard about this class through that, or maybe you found us on Eventbrite. But I actually have been backpacking since, I want to say 2014, and then in 2019 I actually through hiked or completed the John Muir Trail. This is a 200 plus mile hike with almost, I don't know if I think it's 30,000, it's like as much elevation as going up to Mount Everest. But granted, even though I was I would call myself a seasoned backpacker, I didn't really realize what I was getting myself into. That hike or through hike, it was intense, it was difficult. It's probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in the outdoor space, or my outdoor career, I would call it. So I have quite a bit of experience. I've definitely learned a lot by getting out there and continuing to hike. Pretty much, I hike probably a few times every week. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm really excited to be here with you all. I'm really just excited to have fun and to teach you today. And so this is one of my favorite, as you can see, probably my background, you can see that it's a beautiful lake, right? And so it's actually this place. And I love showing this picture because this was one of my favorite backpacking trips. It's in the Sierra. I just feel like putting on this pack and getting to a place and setting up camp and being in nature. It's so beautiful and it's so powerful. And I really just truly enjoyed my time out there. And I really became addicted to backpacking. I would say it's one of my top, besides hiking, one of my top activities. So there's this quote: in every walk with nature, one receives far more than he seeks, and that's from John Muir. And I truly do believe that. And so I'm really happy that you're all here. If you're here, you're probably like thinking about, starting to backpack, or maybe you wanted to learn a little more, or maybe you're seasoned and you can jump into the chat and answer questions. I love it. This is a community effort, and I'm really happy you're here. Okay, so we are going to talk a little bit about our agenda. So our agenda now, and what we're going to learn today, is a little bit on the mental and, give me one sec, someone sounds like, if you're unmuted, please mute yourself. So I'm going to stop my share for a second, try to find, okay, looks like they muted themselves. Thank you. So let's go back to our presentation. And so, okay, going back to what we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about the mental and physical preparation you need before you start backpacking, planning your trip, gear, food, packing your packs, and then some general tips. Okay, so first let's start with the mental and physical preparation to get you to this point of like, I'm ready to backpack. So the reason why 52 Hike Challenge is such a great goal for yourself is because you can actually use it to train for so many different things, right? I know Jeff Hester is here on the call, and he runs, the 6 Pack of Peaks, which is now, they have the challenge all around the US. So it's a great foundation to start just getting outdoors. So taking 52 hikes is absolutely one of the best ways to get started on any of those bigger goals you might have, whether that's climbing Kilimanjaro or doing something like a through hike. You need to start somewhere. And so I really love that 52 Hikes is really accessible. Signing up, committing will help you to start prepping for the things that you might encounter when you start backpacking, because there's so much more that you're going to come across and need to learn in order to feel confident to go out there and to push yourself when you have that big pack on your back and you're like, oh my God, I'm so tired and I just want to give up right now. So learning baby steps is going to be your first and foremost like best friend. And knowing how to encourage yourself, because when we're out there, I think that's when that negative inner dialogue really comes through, and learning how to push past that, but also knowing how to keep yourself safe and doing what's right for yourself. I always like to say that the trail is always there. So if for some reason you're feeling uncomfortable, you're not feeling well, turn around, right? And so knowing those things in advance prepares you for backpacking. And another thing, we're going to focus today on backpacking, but there's a lot we're going to cover that really is a whole different course. Okay, so one of the things you want to do before you start backpacking, in addition to hiking, is camping. I really didn't grow up camping. I didn't grow up hiking. I mean, I hiked a little bit, but I didn't grow up like being an outdoorsy person. And so I had to learn a lot of these things. And so if you at least go and car camp, you start gaining and, collecting your gear, but also you can see how you feel sleeping outside in a tent, right? So you want to take those baby steps so that you can feel confident and ready to take the next steps into backpacking. Okay, the next thing is that you're going to want to prepare and increase your mileage and the weight you're carrying accordingly. So when you're first hiking, you're not going to be carrying a big pack, right? So when you're backpacking, your pack can, weigh anywhere from, 35 to 50 pounds, depending on what you're doing. And you definitely want that weight to be as low as possible, but depending on how far you're going, if you're doing a through hike, that may not be possible. So what you're going to be doing as you're taking your challenge and you're hiking is you're going to start increasing your mileage. You're going to start putting more stuff in your pack so you can train and get your body ready and prepare yourself mentally. So I took some statistics from a book, Conditioning for Outdoor Fitness, that talked about when you're going to be doing these through hikes or any sort of backpacking, you want to start with 4 to 5 short aerobic sessions each week and get your heart up to the 70 to 80 max heart rate. And then once you've already been going out there and hiking and stuff for the first 4 weeks, then you're going to start increasing that, and don't increase more than 10 to 15% per week. Okay, so I made an example. I have an example. Let's say you're hiking 5 miles. 15% of that is around 6 miles. So you would increase each week. You're going to go ahead and increase by a mile for your next hike. And so you don't want to burn yourself out, number one. And number two, you don't want to, have injuries because of overuse, going too fast, too quickly. So these are all things to consider. In addition, for a 16-mile, 2 to 3 day backpacking trip, let's say, or a day hike of 8 to 10 miles with 4,000 feet of elevation gain. Okay, this is elevation gain is how much you're going to go, what an incline, or how much of an incline you're going to be going up when you're hiking. Okay, so 4,000 feet of elevation gain is a lot. That's a long, it's intense. And so you definitely also want to be increasing that elevation. So thinking about starting with 500 feet of elevation gain and then increasing that gradually as well will help you. But anyhow, going back to training, it should take about 8 weeks of training for you to do something like this if you're being consistent. So just so you guys are aware and thinking about this as you're thinking about planning your trips. And then something you can do to train is you can add extra water to your pack. So when you get to the top of, a peak, or when you're done with your hike, you can pour it out. So you're going to definitely need to feel it on yourself and your body and see how you do with that extra weight. Again, thinking about, I might be carrying 30 to 50 pounds, depending on how long I'm going out there. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about that mental and that physical aspect of getting to backpacking. Let's talk about locations, because that's going to be your next thing that you're going to want to do. Once you're like, I definitely want to do this, I'm going to commit to training, the next thing that's going to motivate you is picking your goal, picking your backpacking trip. So start by, how do you find them, right? You can ask friends, you can ask friends, you can go online and find inspiration through blogs, articles. You can go on, for example, All Trails has I believe they have a backpacking filter. You can go to, for example, your local outdoor retailer, for like example, REI, and ask people there. There's just so many different ways of finding inspiration. And you can also go guided. You can go with friends. I was mentioning this Highlander event. You can take a trip with REI. But I'm going to give you an example of one backpacking location in Southern California. There is a place you can backpack there in Crystal Cove Park, and it's a wonderful beginner-friendly backpacking trip. Okay, so the reason why I picked it is because you can make this trek in like 2 to 3 miles of a hike in. So if you're new to backpacking, you can test yourself out and you're not that far from the trailhead in case of an emergency, or if you're not feeling comfortable, you can actually, get there, decide this isn't for me, and head out, and then you're good. At least you tried it out, right? So we always say start with like something smaller that's not too far from the trailhead. Also, this location, I believe, had reception. So these are things to think about as you're starting out. And then again, make sure to check that elevation profile before you go ahead and pick that location, because that's really gonna have a lot to do with how you train for this first backpacking trip. The other thing we're going to talk about in a moment is, I'll just share it now, is when you're picking your location, being aware of the times or the weather when you're planning to go. Like, I would not want to be in the Grand Canyon in July when it is deadly hot. Okay, so be mindful that the weather really can impact your trip, and you may have to plan accordingly and prepare differently. So once you pick your location, then there's the next step of the research process, which is, you need to find out if there's permits you're going to need. You need to think about water sources, and there's so many logistics. So let's see. So one of the most important things is to practice leave no traces principle of plan ahead, okay? And it's also a recreate responsibly guideline, which is called know before you go. And that is, you do your due diligence. You don't just show up to the trailhead. You actually research as much information so that you're prepared, and when you prepare, you're planning to succeed rather than fail, okay? And so there's a lot of things that can be avoided by planning ahead of time and doing the things you need to do to be ready for this trip. So one of the big things that you need to check beforehand is, do I need a permit where I want to go? For example, that hike that I showed you in the beginning, that I told you that I fell in love with backpacking, you need a permit to do that specific backpacking trip. And so you can't just show up to the trailhead with your backpacking gear and then think, oh, I'm just going to go backpacking. And what happens if you get stopped and you don't have your permit? You're going to have to turn around. So know that, and also know that permits are and can be complicated to get, especially with so many people getting outdoors nowadays. There is a process. Sometimes that process can be, I was looking at the Grand Canyon one today as an example, and it's 4 months ahead of your trip. So you need to know when to submit those permits, read the fine print. There's usually some sort of submission. Sometimes you can use different websites like recreation.gov, for example, to book your permits, but also it is dependent upon what hike you're doing or what backpacking trip you're going on. Every agency has different processes. So that's why you need to start right away. Once you're like, I definitely want to backpack, I would say start researching a year to 6 months in advance. Okay. Just to ensure that you can try to at least apply for the permits. There are also day of permits available, or I haven't been to the agencies lately. In the past, you could walk into agencies and, ask for permit if there were any permits available, and you could sometimes get like permits like the day before. So again, these are things you'll figure out when you're researching. All right, so in your planning, as you're thinking about where you're going, you're going to have to also look up what is the flora and fauna, and that is going to tell you how to prepare for animal encounters, or maybe what kind of fauna you're going to encounter. Sometimes there could be poison ivy, and so you need to also prepare with the right gear for those conditions. You want to look up, what's available nearby, knowing emergency contact numbers and ranger stations, planning your route, and that can take quite a bit of time. So give yourself plenty of time and know that this is super fun and super rewarding, but it does take planning and it does take preparation. And then the other thing is, depending on if you're going, overnight, or if you're going for multiple days, you need to do your due diligence when it comes to your water sources. And when I did the John Muir Trail, I used an app called Gut Hook, which is now Far Out Guides. I used CalTopo to plan my everyday and where I was going to camp. And there's books out there. I also had a book for the John Muir Trail. Depending on what backpacking trip I'm doing, I just go online and I'll do different research. I'll usually go buy a map at the local REI. I love the maps, like the National Geographic maps. They're really lovely and have so much information. And so these are all part of the planning process. So make sure to take your time to research and gather all those super amazing tools. Okay, so going back to when you're planning, you're always going to need to check conditions, know as much as you can. For example, when you're doing the John Muir Trail, when you're on top of passes, there's times where it's storming and you don't want to be on top of a pass when there's a storm and lightning. And what do you do, right? So again, researching the weather so you understand what the conditions are and what you need to prepare for, how to prepare for those conditions, what to do in case of. So here are some resources: weather.gov or mountainforecast.com. And also this is going to help you to plan what gear you're going to bring. And in addition to not only the gear you're going to bring, it's going to help you to decide, like, is this the right time to do this hike or not? All of that will impact your trip. So please be mindful of that. And always, regardless, even if you're heading out like tomorrow, check the conditions for all your hikes. Even if you've planned ahead and it was supposed to be good weather, make sure to do that before you head out at all times. We're going to jump into gear now. I'm not going to get super detailed because all of this is in our Hiking 101 course, which is now available on our website for purchase. It is over 3 hours of hiking content and how-tos and gear and all of that. So you can check that out. But always need to carry those 10 essentials. The 10 essentials are that navigation, and knowing how to navigate is super important. So take a map and compass class, please. Sun protection, your insulation, which is your extra clothing, like your sweater, illumination, your first aid supplies. You need to have some sort of fire method in case of an emergency, if you needed to light a fire, repair kit and tools, nutrition, which is your food, your snacks, hydration, and your emergency shelter. So these are the 10 items you should always carry according to the mountaineers, but not just the mountaineers. Everyone who is an outdoor educator will tell you these are the items you need to carry because they will save your life, if something happens out there. All right, so again, this is all in Hiking 101, so I'm going to kind of briefly go through it. There is specific gear that I would say if you're going to get into backpacking, I would opt for more technical gear, just because you want to protect yourself from the sun. When you're hiking for days, and I know for me on the John Muir Trail, I ended up getting pretty burned. I ended up buying like the sun gloves, but you know, the conditions are so much more intense when you're out there and day in and day out, you know, setting up your trekking pole, and you get cuts and stuff. So you really want to take care of your skin. You want to take care of your body. You want to have clothing that is going to protect you from the sun. And also, like when you're hiking, if you brush up against something, it's not going to poke through. So that's why I don't recommend yoga pants for backpacking. I say get your technical gear in order by then. So you know, you want good socks, wool socks that fit you well so that you're not getting blisters, and probably will get blisters, by the way, when you're backpacking. I mean, it's more common when you're not used to so much mileage on your feet to have hot spots and such. So good socks. And then you need to have a layering system. Again, not going to really get into it today, but one of the most important things is to carry a shell that is waterproof, windproof, because the weather can just change dramatically out in the mountains and in the outdoors, and you want to make sure that you're protected in case of rain. So please add a rain jacket to your gear kit. I would always keep it in my gear kit. I even wear my rain jacket when it's not raining, and it's really nice to have that shell. It really does keep me warm if I get chilly out. But what we will talk about is the additional things that you're going to need to bring. Like, you may not need to bring these on your hikes, but you will need these on a backpacking trip. So this is a good time to think about a puffy jacket. It's for, you know, campfire time, or, well, not actually, let me take that back. This is if you're camping, right? Campfires. When you're backpacking, most likely you aren't having campfires. You have to check too if they're allowed. But anyhow, so a nice puffy jacket will keep you warm. I usually put it on around 5 p.m. and I sleep with it, and really keeps me insulated. So you definitely want probably a beanie. The temperatures really dramatically change from day to night. Like once the sun sets, you will notice mostly like that you'll start getting chilly. You definitely want to have some sort of camp sandal for, you know, letting your feet rest and recovery. You want to have some sort of you want to have a good pair of gloves. And again, we talked about that rain jacket. You're going to want your PJs and extra warm socks and stuff like that. So just things to start thinking about and to start collecting as you are getting into your backpacking. Okay, so for footwear, you are going to, for me personally, I like wearing hiking boots when I'm backpacking, because that extra weight, I tend to already be a little, what's the word I want to say for myself? Clumsy. So I tend to sometimes twist my foot when I'm hiking. So I like to go with a boot. So these are, here is some Oboz boots. Oboz is one of our sponsors, so that's why you're seeing their shoes, but really they're great. Great brand, and I really like their hiking shoes. So I'm just giving you an example of something. There's so many other options out there, and you need to really find something that works for you. I know some people that are through hikers and like going ultra lightweight, really like you know, Hokas and those kinds of like ultras, I think is what they're called. I don't do those types of shoes for myself because they don't work well for me, but you can do whatever works for you. And again, that's why the importance of testing out your gear, going on a test hike or backpacking trip to see, how do my feet do with these kinds of shoes? Okay, so I definitely will put this in the chat at some point, but we do have a checklist that is provided through REI so that you can actually start looking at that gear checklist and start basically collecting these items. There's a lot to collect, but there's some stuff you don't need. And as you get comfortable with backpacking, you're going to know what you need, what you want, what's a comfort item, what you're willing to put that, you know, am I willing to carry this extra chair and put the extra, you know, whatever, whatever it is, 2 pounds. So those are things that you'll learn as you start backpacking, and you'll learn how to be more efficient with each trek that you go on. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about backpacking packs. And there are so many options, tons of brands out there. We actually do work with Osprey, and they're great packs. They're really comfortable. So you can check that out. You know, they have different sizes depending on how far you're going, what you're doing, what what your trip is going to entail, what kind of gear you need to bring. Like snow hikes, you definitely need a much larger pack, because you're going to have to probably carry a lot more things like snowshoes and ice axe possibly. So and then you can actually go to super ultra lightweight backpacking, which is more expensive. Anything that's ultra lightweight is going to be a lot more, but you're going to be saving some pounds, which when you're doing a lot of through hikes, you might actually say, I wish I would have done this sooner. And, or, I have a friend who has osteoporosis. And so for her, she absolutely, everything she owns is ultra lightweight because she wants to backpack, but she can't carry that extra weight. So please be aware that there are tons of options, and you'll need to go to your local outdoor retailer to get fitted for what your specific needs are, and also just to see how you feel with the pack on, okay? Because it's very different than wearing a backpack. And there's a lot of things that you'll learn as you actually take your first trip, but make sure that you know how to properly not only fit your pack, but that it's adjusted accordingly. Like there's people that sometimes have their pack like half off to the side. So do make sure that it's fitted properly and that you're aligning it, adjusting the weight accordingly. There's certain ways that you can do that with the different pulleys, not pulleys, but the straps. Okay. So get comfortable with that. Ask questions, go online, do some more due diligence. Okay. So you've got your gear down, you've got your pack ready. Now what? You need to think about your shelter. And again, same thing. So many different brands available. We use a lot of REI tents on our end, but there's tons of different brands. And again, there's ultra lightweight, tents out there. It's incredible how far everything in the outdoors has come. So you can, if you're backpacking on your own, or maybe you're backpacking with others, but you want to sleep on your own in your own privacy and comfort. Like when I did the JMT, even though my friend and I could have shared a tent, we decided not to. And I'm very glad we didn't, because I think at the end of the night, we were just beat and we wanted privacy. And so it worked out really well. So you can do a one-person tent, and then, or a two-man if you're like sharing with a partner or a friend. And then usually what we do is we'll share the equipment, like we'll break it in half. Like one person will take the tent stakes, one person will take the actual canvas, or not canvas, but the actual tent itself material. And so that way you're sharing in the weight. And that's another cool thing about going with friends. Sometimes, you can share a stove and fuel. So just know that these are ways to cut back on the amount of weight you're going to carry. Now, I want to say that the tents that are listed on the right, those are all 3-season tents. So you can use those in spring, fall, and winter time usually. Okay. Now, granted, some places in the spring are really cold. So if there's snow, you're going to want to look for something that is a 4-season tent. And those tents are really meant to, be used in the snow. So this is an example of a 4-season tent. It's going to be a lot thicker. I've slept in those before. I've actually snow camped a few times, and it is much colder. So I prefer to stick to 3-season camping. And then another option, just, the first time I backpacked Havasu High Falls, I actually took a bivvy, and it's not a tent, but it's a shelter. And I thought that was easier for me. It was like my second backpacking trip, I want to say. And it was so small. And I really was like, I didn't want to carry a lot of extra weight. You can also cowboy camp, right? Some people just flop out their mat and put their sleeping bag out and they sleep comfortably. That's not for me, but it could be for you, something to think about. Okay, so once you have your tent situated, then you need to think about your sleeping system. Okay, so this is going to be your sleeping pad, your sleeping bag, and something for a pillow. So when you're thinking about that, just give me 1 second. I'm moving some little things around here. Okay, when you're thinking about this, or when you're looking into buying these, there's so many different options when it comes to your sleeping pad. And some people only use this item here in the blue. That's called a Z Rest, and it's by Thermarest, and that in itself is fine. You can just sleep on that if you want, but for extra comfort, which I personally like, I do like that extra padded sleeping pad. Whatever you do, you definitely want to make sure that you have at least a 2.7 R rating, which is, as you can see this little graphic here that shows you like what you can use, that what temperature rating, so you're not like freezing at night. Okay, so just be aware and be mindful. And I do want to say that I had an experience where my sleeping pad actually was leaking air, and I didn't bring my extra Z pad, and I was so bummed. And after that day, I promised myself I would never backpack again without my Z pad, because it was miserable waking up in the middle of the night and I'm on the ground and I'm like shivering. So then once I exited the trail, I ended up going to buy a Z pad. Even though I had one, I didn't bring it because I was like, oh, like it'll be fine. I have one, that's okay. And I wanted to minimize the amount of weight, but this Z pad really weighs nothing. So I had a speaker last week talking to my group, 2023 challengers, about backpacking herself. She's a backpacking teacher. Her name is Allison. She runs She Dreams of Alpine. And she said something that was really a reminder of bring things, like have a redundant system for things that are really important, including like water filter, which we'll get into in a minute. Anyhow, let's move on. So sleeping bags, super important that wherever you're going to be hiking, you look up the lowest temperatures and that your sleeping bag accommodates that. Okay, because the first time I went camping, I knew nothing. And I had a 50-degree sleeping bag, and I think it was 30 degrees, and we were so cold. So these are the stories that you look back on and you're like, yeah, I've come a long way since then. So you're going to find different bags that have 0-degree rating, 30-degree rating, 50-degree rating. Just make sure that when you're camping what the lowest temperatures are. The last thing you want is to be cold. It's not fun. You don't sleep. I'm sure some of you can relate to that. And I'm not looking at the chat, by the way, right now. We'll do chat at the end, but you're welcome to, add questions as we go, and we'll address them at the end. All right, lastly, a pillow, and that's really up to you. You can, some people use a buff and they put, their clothing in it and sleep on that. I do carry one of these little small pillows, and they work fine. I wouldn't say they're the most comfortable. It's not like sleeping in a bed, but it's still something for yourself. So definitely things to consider with your sleep system. All right, now let's talk a little bit about the other items that you may want to consider. Other items that you may want to consider include some sort of a GPS. Actually, I would almost say to me, that's more of a mandatory item, just because you never know. So there's so many different brands you can use. There's, Garmin and Zoleo, and I do have a spot device, and I used it on the John Muir Trail and it worked fine. But if you want to, be able to text your loved ones, you can do that with the Garmin. So having that is really important. Having a way to carry your water is really important. I like a water bottle for electrolytes when I'm backpacking. Really important to have those electrolytes when you're hiking, because using up so much of your energy, and you're like, sometimes you're sweating and you're, you need to replenish all of that, all of the salts that that you're sweating. So that's why I like carrying both a reservoir and a water bottle. I really think trekking poles are a must for backpacking. It's just, you have so much more stuff you're carrying, and it just helps with balance. I know for me, again, being a little clumsy, they've helped me like save me so many times from tripping and falling. So I'm a huge fan. And I definitely think they definitely help with, the just kind of helping with that balance. Depending on what you're doing, you may need to carry a bear can or some sort of a bear bag. I've never used a bear bag before. I've seen them. So learning how to use those is going to be key, but bear can I have used, and a lot of places do require that. Okay. And we'll talk a little bit more about some tips with that in a moment. A part of your system and your items is going to be some sort of way to cook your meals if you're going to be doing some sort of overnight or longer multi-day backpacking trip. So there are, again, so many options when it comes to your cooking stove. I personally just think the Jetboil is such an easy, I don't mind the extra weight. Ultralight hikers will totally say this is way too heavy, but again, I'm not an ultra lightweight hiker. I don't mind the weight, and it's just super easy to use. Even sometimes when the clickers fail, you just grab, a lighter and it lights up, and it's just really easy to use. I really like mine. I've had it for, the last almost 10 years. There's these meals that are, you can go buy packaged meals at REI, for example. There's tons now. There's so many different brands coming out. We have worked with Mountain House before, and for the most part, I've had no issues with their food. But sometimes you might want to get recommendations from your friends. Hey, what's your favorite backpacking meal? My friend Connie cooked some food, and she dehydrated food, and so there were some homemade meals, and that was really lovely. And so you're probably going to need to boil water. So just kind of thinking about what kind of stove works for you. Testing things out beforehand is really great. Going online, doing your due diligence, and then having some sort of really ultra lightweight, like titanium spoon or fork to eat your food with is also important. And I talked about that hydration. Give me one sec here. I talked a little bit about this hydration. And so, having some sort of maybe these noon tablets are fine. Just making sure to bring enough for yourself. And, sometimes I meet people on the trail that are dehydrated. So I end up giving people these all the time. I'm just briefly going to touch on snow cooking. I'm not sure most of you, if you're new, are going to be doing a lot of snow hikes. But if you are, this is a stove, because believe it or not, the propane does freeze. So you need, tip, learning moment. There are certain things you want to keep in the tent with you and keep warm. One of them is your propane, especially if it's going to get cold at night, because it can actually not work because of the cold temperatures. So that's good. Also your filter, which we'll talk about in a little bit. May want to, depending on which filter you have, you may want to put that in your tent as well. So going back to in the snow, this is a kerosene and gasoline stove that is made by MSR. It looks kind of complicated. I've used it before, but I wouldn't say this is my go-to, just because I kind of stay away from snow hiking. So I don't really need to bring this with me. I just wanted to show that to you. Okay, talking about water filtration now. And like I said, when you're on multi-day, you will probably have to filter. There's a lot of different options for you. You can do some sort of a tablet. The Sawyer squeeze filter is what a lot of backpackers and ultra lightweight hikers, through hikers, really like it. I really like it. Actually, Sawyer is one of our sponsors this year. I've used that gravity filter, and I've taken it backpacking, and it's great. It's cool because you like go and fill the bag up. hang it, and then it just, you let it filter into your, for me, it's like my reservoir. So it's really pretty easy to use. And then there's also like this Steri pen, but with these little tablets and even the Steri pen, if you're drinking water from a source that's maybe a little bit dirty, like those two are not going to get rid of the dirt, where like a filter will actually, you'll see clear water. Last week we had a presentation with Sawyer as well, and they showed us, like, they took a dirty bottle of water and like put a glass next to it and filtered it, and it was clear. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so wonderful to actually see it. And just one moment. Okay, we still have people joining us. It's so wonderful. So the water membrane, the filter membrane in the Sawyer filter, because again, think about it, it's wet, right? During the freezing cold, it can fail. So keep that filter, if you're going to go for that, keep that in your tent, okay? And there is a way to clean your filter, you backwash it. So those are all things that you'll learn as you continue your backpacking. All right. This is a photo of my one of my packs when I was packing for the JMT, and you can see like it was for like a week or something, or maybe 5 days, or I don't remember, but basically like you could see I had my snacks and my, I had all the things I was going to eat. And you need to plan your food in advance. So you're going to need, depending on how far you're going, how many miles you're doing, how many, what the elevation gain is, you're going to need at least 2,000 to 4,000 calories each day. That's going to add about 1.5 pounds to 2.5 pounds of food to your pack. So just kind of be mindful about that. And REI had this quote saying that, if you're doing 10 miles of strenuous hiking with a 4,000-foot climb, you're going to burn even more calories. So just make sure you're consuming more food and eat. Sometimes people don't, with altitude, you don't feel super hungry, but you need those calories. So whatever food you set aside, if you go, at the end of your trek, you like look and you're like, I have all this food, you may not be eating enough, and you really do need to replenish those calories. So little tip, do not store food in your tent, because mice and rats and marmots will get into they'll chew through your stuff, they'll chew through your backpack. So have some plan ahead of how you're going to keep your food from being taken away by the animals. All right. So this is an image I found that kind of shows you an example of how you want to pack your pack. Once you've got all your items laid out, you're going to want to start with, putting your sleeping bag and, maybe your tent in the bottom. And then you're going to put your heavier stuff up towards your back, like the upper back. And then your lighter things on top. Now, here's another little tip. I don't put my clothes, you see how this shows clothes up here? I don't really put my clothes up there. What I do is I stuff my clothes all around the backpack so that I don't have this huge pack sticking out, and I try to make it like smaller. And with your different, I keep forgetting this word, I'm sorry, you guys. But your different adjustments on your loops and your belts and all of that, you'll be able to adjust your pack smaller and compact and all of that. So your pad, usually there's some outer all right, someone in the chat, remind me, what am I missing here? Straps, thank you. See, sometimes I just forget things, and that's okay. So your straps, you'll use your straps to, sometimes I even put my tent, depending on what pack I'm wearing. I'm not embarrassed, but I'm embarrassed. I have enough to probably outfit 5 people. So depending on which pack I'm using, I will use those straps on the bottom of the pack to put my mat or that tent. All right, thank you for that, Melissa. I appreciate that. All right, so now let's move into some tips, and then we'll jump into any questions or comments. So when you're first starting out, there are so many ways to not break the bank because it can be expensive to start. And so, you know, asking friends to borrow gear is one way. You can rent gear. REI does have a rental, they have a rentals department. Obviously check with them beforehand. Other tips, you definitely want to test out your gear beforehand. You don't want to get to the trail and, you know, maybe late and then get to your campsite late. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what I'm doing here. So have a fun day, like have some wine or whatever your drink of choice is, put on some music and test out your gear. I think that will be really, really helpful. And you're probably going to say, I'm so glad I did this at home before I was on the trail because X, Y, and Z, you know? So definitely do that for yourself. Remember when you're out there to take those breaks, you can expect like within 15 minutes, you're probably going to feel hot. You're going to probably remove a layer. You know, take a quick break every hour, and then don't forget to enjoy your lunch and take those breaks. I think on the JMT, that was like my favorite part of the day was taking a lunch break. We took like a 1 hour break and we would, you know, take our socks off, take our shoes off, dip our feet in some, you know, creek, because our feet were really hurting after, you know, day in and day out of, you know, miles. And I mean, it was a lot. There is something you can learn called the rest step. And that's just a way of kind of helping you to, you know, making sure that as you're going up, you're kind of giving yourself a rest, and then it's nice. So check it out. Bringing Advil and ibuprofen, I put that in there. I know it's funny, but there were days on the JMT that like me and my partner were exhausted and we were just like, we need some Advil today. Like our bones hurt, you know, and, you know, it's just, it's something that might help you along the way. So definitely consider making sure that that's a part of your kit, your emergency kit. And there's so much more that we can talk about, but you know, you're depending on when you're going and bugs, you may want to permethrin your stuff, your tent, so that you know, you're repelling, you know, all the different mosquitoes and the ticks. And or making sure that you have bug spray. Technu does a really cool little wipe, and they, you know, if you rub across something like poison oak, you rub yourself with the wipe and that will take the oils off your skin. So important, especially for backpacking, is knowing how to care for blisters, okay? Because most likely you will encounter a blister at some point. You know, you're on your feet all day, you know, things are rubbing, and yes, there's precautionary measures you can take, but you just, it's a different thing once you're out there and you're doing this and you have that extra weight. So knowing like what kind of tape to bring, there's a tape out there called Luca tape. I believe I'm going to share that with you next week, but Luca tape, which is really great and doesn't come off, and, you know, like Neosporin for it. Just make sure you know how to care for your feet and for blisters. All right, other tips. You definitely want to make sure to bring extra batteries for your headlamp or for any other items you may be bringing that need batteries. Bring that battery pack with you, the charging cords. I think a lot of people are probably using their apps nowadays to navigate, but always, like I said earlier, bring that map with you, and carry it in a Ziploc bag, because you should always look at your phone as a side, not as your primary source of navigating. Your phone could fall, you know, your phone could die. Like there's a million things that could happen out there, and you do not want to be dependent upon your phone for that. So make sure that you always have a map when you're going in the backcountry, and that you are aware of how to navigate. Okay. Arriving earlier for easier setup is really great. Always finding durable surfaces to camp in. This is a leave no trace principle. So they talk about good campsites are found, not created. Please take the leave no trace course. It's free to take. And you know, we all need to do our part to be stewards of the land. Like, for example, you may not know that it is a no-no to camp in a meadow. So, yes, it may look beautiful, but you're actually damaging the future of what could be there, and also the homes of, you know, the animals that live in the meadows. And there's just so much to learn. But anyhow, looking for durable surfaces, trying to find the most even area to pitch a tent is really important. If, you know, and when you use the restroom, making sure that you are camping, or I'm sorry, that you are going at least 200 feet away from lakes, streams, and trails. And by the way, I did shameless plug. We do have a women's kula cloth. If you don't know what this is, I don't know how I went so long without one, but basically it's a reusable pee cloth. When you go pee, you wipe yourself, you can wash it and hang it and let it dry. And so, yeah, we have that. We have a new one coming out in the next couple of weeks. And I think we're more than halfway sold out. So get yours. Store your food. You know, we talked about this with your bear can. So with a bear can, you usually also don't want to put that so close to your sleeping quarters. I usually put mine quite far away, and I put it somewhere where, in case a bear did come by and try to open it, it's not going to go rolling down a hill, because that would be detrimental, right? Like to my trip. So being aware of where you place it, I usually kind of hide it somewhere and I put rocks around it. So store smelly items away. That includes, you know, things like soap and toothpaste. Don't leave that in your tent. And then don't forget to enjoy and journal. And I loved writing at night and talking about all the cool things and people I met on the trail. Okay. So we're done with our presentation for today. I'm going to give you a couple of quick little notes. There is an event. Highlander did sponsor this event tonight, and basically they have a backpacking event. So if you're new to backpacking, they're going to take care of the food, where you're sleeping. They have they have like night discussions and activities. And I did go last year and it was fun. So I actually am planning to go again this year. I know a girlfriend already got her ticket and we're going to go together. It was fun. And they provided like a catered dinner. So it's a great way to get started. If you haven't been, if you haven't been before and you want to try it out, I would say check it out. And there is a 20% discount that you can use through April 10th. So the Big Bear Lake one is May 23rd through May 27th. And they do have some other ones in Utah and Montana and Lake Tahoe. So check them out and let them know we sent you. Also, if you are new to hiking and you don't know that you can do 52 hike challenge or 52 hikes in a year, you may want to do something like our spring series, which is based off of hours outdoors, and you basically commit to 30 hours outdoors within 12 weeks. Much more doable, much easier, and kind of gets your feet wet. So that just started March 20th. You can go on our website to learn more. And finally, we are going to talk Backpacking 102 next Thursday, same place, same time. I think what I'm going to do though is I'm going to let people know not to join us on Facebook, but join us on Zoom, or they'll get the recording. And that one's going to be all about, like, once I'm on trail, what are the things I'm going to encounter? Like talking about food and, other tips that I've learned and will be sharing with you all. All right, let's jump into questions. I'm going to stop my share here. And I'm going to jump on with all of you and kind of see what things came through. And hopefully there's so much more to learn, but you're going to learn it as you start prepping and taking these different resources that I've given you. And as you're hiking, you're going to learn. So that's one of the best things to do, is just kind of set a goal for yourself and start getting the gear ready. Okay. Someone wanted to know a little bit about tent or hammock. Okay. So I have never tried to sleep in a hammock because I just know myself and I don't think I would be really comfortable. And then there's also, like, you need to make sure that if you're going to hammock, you still need to have insulation. So that could be really uncomfortable if you didn't know that and you just brought a hammock and you're out there and you're like, it's so cold. So for me personally, not my specific cup of tea, but if anyone does have hammocking experience, feel free to, share in the comments. The other thing about hammocks, yes, obviously it's much smaller. I do have a hammock and I have brought it outdoors, but it's like this big. So yeah, you can cut back on that tent, right? But you'll still need that insulation, which, might include some sort of a pad, and some sort of like cover for your hammock. So, so yeah, we talked a little bit about the water supply. All right, let's see, what else do we have here? Okay, so April wants to know a little bit about winter backpacking tips. So I would also stick to we talked about the 4-season tent, making sure your sleeping bag is rated to the temperatures, and you want to have like you want to have a pad so that when you're sitting to eat, you're not like, and again, I wouldn't personally recommend like bringing extra stuff, because snow camping already might entail bringing gear that is heavier, and you're going to need more. So you can bring a sleeping pad. And like, I know when we did snow camp, I did this course called a wilderness travel course with the Sierra Club. We made these snowbank chairs, and then we used the pads like the Z-Rest that I showed you, and that was how we stayed insulated. And then yeah, just having the extra layers you're going to need in the winter time. But it can still be fun and doable. I mean, I still slept. A tip for you is you can boil water and put it in, for boiling water, you could put it in a Nalgene bottle and put that inside of make sure it's covered really well, put it in your sleeping bag, and that will create extra warmth for you. It's actually a really cool tip that you guys get to hear here. So I hope that's helpful for snow hiking. But I think, if you're kind of hesitant, I would almost say maybe try like a guided or something like that class that I was telling you, because it just was that much more almost like motivating, right? To go out and do something in the snow. And you may also need snowshoes. So you'll need to carry a bigger pack with you on that. Okay, need to know how to pack everything needed, but yet keep the load light. Okay, yeah, so Amy, you may want to look at what I was talking about, which is the ultra lightweight. And again, like, you'll see what you really need with you. Like, I've gotten to a point where, like, I think my pack weighed, I don't even know, 25 pounds, 20 pounds for like a quick overnight, because I'm like, okay, I know I don't need that. I know I need that, so you'll see, like, there's stuff that I've brought before that I'm like, I didn't really need to bring that, so, but I would definitely recommend check and look into the ultra lightweight gear. Beth wanted to know about the bear canister versus the bag. Like I said, I don't have experience with the bag, but I do have experience with the bear canister. There's also a company out there that does an ultra lightweight canister. I don't remember the name, but you can probably look it up. And that's another option as well. And if you're going to use the bear bag, make sure you know how to use it, because you're supposed to technically hang it. And I don't know about how you, like, if you hang it, how do you get it down at, the next morning, and make sure it's not, doesn't get stuck up there. Being cold while camping and trying to sleep is the worst. Yeah. And by the way, also, if you have to go pee, because it's really cold at night, I highly recommend that you actually get out, unzip. Oh, and ladies, I finally used the little pee foam thing, or it's not a pee foam. It's called a pee. I don't remember the name, but it's this little thing that you put down there, and like, you can just stick it out, or you have some sort of a, I don't know, a Gatorade bottle. And anyways, I don't have to get TMI, but at the same time, no. So that is something you can use if you in the middle of the night. But the worst thing is needing to go pee and sitting there in your tent. You're not going to sleep. It's just not going to happen. How many days worth of food do you get in? Okay, so there's two different size of canisters that I've come across so far. There's one that's like more for like maybe 3 days, maybe you could squeeze in 3 days into the smaller canister. And then there's the larger one, and that one I believe you can usually do up to a week. The other thing is some locations have a bare bin. So I encountered someone on the JMT that literally was like, I carried 2 weeks worth of food. And I know that was a lot. I don't know how she did it, but she was putting the extra food into the bare boxes that were on the trail. So she had to obviously sleep where there were bare bins. So just some side notes, but yeah, 7 days is about, I think you're kind of pushing it at 7 days. And then also don't forget that you can minimize the food, right? Like you can go from like for example, the Mountain House meals, you can break them in half. Like sometimes I didn't want to eat the whole Mountain House. I wanted ramen and Mountain House. So you can cut those in half, and you can also repackage things to save, because you're going to have to pack out your stuff. So to save, trash, and things like that. Think about how can I repackage my snacks? That will help you to save space in your bag. Okay, so Amy said that Wisconsin, the University of Recreation Centers rent out gear at a very minimal price. Thank you for that. What kind of sleeping pad did I recommend again? Okay, so the sleeping pad, the one that is more of like the bed one, the one that kind of looks like, those inflatable bed ones. There's so many brands out there. Thermarest is a really good one. I also have the REI Flash one, which is really small and nice, and I like that. But Thermarest, honestly, they have some of the best. I've had one Thermarest last me 6+ years, and Thermarest is the one that does the bottom one that's called a Z pad. So let me actually in the chat find it for you real quick, just so I can. So I can just give it to you, and that way it's easy. And it's not expensive. Like that one that you can use this one for most, probably 3 season. It shouldn't be an issue. Here, let me send it to you. This, I don't know if this is, yeah, this is active. Okay, so I'm going to put it in the chat right now, and I'll put some other things in the chat, but that's the Thermarest Z pad that you always want to carry with you. Okay, let's see. All right, let's see what else. Sherry said there's a lot of great gear that goes along with the hammock. So you see, yes, maybe it's a little bit smaller, but there's also other additions you need. So you'll have to kind of see what works for you. Why not test out the hammock camping somewhere close to home? At least if you're like, hey, I can't sleep, you can drive home, right? What would be my recommendation for a single day use only pack, something that is weatherproof? So Steve, something that's a good question. Something that's like a 40 liter would be really good. And there's just so many brands out there. As I was saying to everyone, everyone has different needs, and certain packs work for certain people. I've talked to so many people on the trails that are like, Osprey didn't work for me, but Gregory did. And someone says, Gregory didn't work for me, but Osprey did. So really, that's why I say go to your local retailer and like test it out on yourself. Like that's part one. But I do have an REI Flash. It was like a Flash, like a 40 liter. Let me see if I could find it just to give you an example. And I can take that on an overnight, and it's like no problem. It's super easy. It's like, even when I still do small, 1 hour backpack, trips. And so, I'll just give you an example of this. I think it's the REI Flash, maybe the 45. And it may not even be available anymore. Yeah, see, I'll give you an example. I'm just going to put it in the chat. I don't think it's available anymore, but you can kind of get an idea of what I've used for a overnight, 1 day, quick, easy, and done. And, you know, also, Steve, some of the packs come with a rain cover. So my Gregory pack, Jade, it's the Jade, I believe I have the Jade 65. It comes with the rain cover, and that's, you know, if anything happens, I just plop that in and plop it over and it's all good. And I haven't had any issues with that. Okay, let's see what else we've got here. Did that pack come to everyone? Yeah, I think it did go to everyone, but if not, let me put that in here again, just in case I replied to one person. Okay, how do we sign up for next week? Okay, yes, I will send this. I will actually put that in the chat right now. Give me 1 second. I'm going to give you that link. Here is the link for next week. Let me know if you got that. And I'm trying to think if there were any other links I wanted to share with you all before we close out for today. Yeah, the only other link I want to share is if you are interested in joining the Highlander events or learning more, I'm going to put that link right here for you. There is one more link I was going to actually share. We do have that backpacking checklist on our website. And when you purchase something from REI, we do get a tiny commission. So, I mean, we do all our work thanks to, you know, our sponsors and all of this and people who support us. So anytime you're going to buy anything from REI, please consider using our link. Hold on 1 second. Did it go through? Yeah. Okay. Kind of. It may or may not be working, and that's okay. Okay, yeah. So anything else? I'm here. You can unmute yourself if you'd like. Otherwise, we will see you next week. And I'm very grateful to have been able to connect with you all today. You're so welcome, everyone. I really appreciate the feedback. I hope you learned something. And it sounds like we're good. All right. Have a blessed rest of your evening, and I'll see you next week. Bye.